Vaccines, with government ramping up that rollout. Whether it's fast enough, we'll wait to find out. Coronavirus infections also appear to be on the decline. Now, tomorrow night, President Ramaphosa is expected to address the nation and update us on what the next steps are. So let's speak to the South African Medical Research Council's Dr. Glenda Gray joining us now. Dr. Good, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. As we wait for the President, we are assuming tomorrow evening for another family meeting. Numbers are down, vaccines are up, but it isn't the time to get complacent, is it?
I think it's very important that we open up the economy and that we start to relax the restrictions so that we can prevent people who have lost their jobs from getting any more further devastation. So I do hope that restaurants will be open and that we'll be able to move around better than we have been in level 4 lockdown. We know that the alcohol prohibition did decrease unnatural deaths in our country and did help with opening hospital beds. And so I think the big discussion will be around what we do with alcohol sales, how we contain the unnatural deaths, and how we continue to keep hospital beds open for COVID admissions. So I think hopefully we will see a movement into opening up the economy and trying to get us down to a lower level of lockdown.
So when
really important to open up the schools. Just to say, I mean, schools have to open. If there's one thing that has to happen on Mondays, we have to keep the schools open. We've got to save the academic year, and there's been a huge attempt to vaccinate teachers, and so we have to help keep schools open, and that's going to be a critical thing moving forward.
Let's just unpack those three issues for the moment, all of them having financial implications and economic implications as well. The first one, as you say, tourism opening up. Are you saying the opening up of international borders as well? Is it opening up for international tourists to come here? Just how wide open do we go on that?
Well, I think as we see the surge coming down, as we see the numbers of infections coming down, and we open up our borders, a lot of tourists have got vaccinated, and so they will be protected against the Delta variant. And so I think it's important to look at our tourist industry, and the fact that a lot of people will have received vaccination makes it much easier for us to accept tourists into our country who have come from abroad.
And what do you make of the argument that if we keep the alcohol industry closed, it's going to destroy the industry? We still have that debate, don't we, Doctor? I think you and I spoke at the very beginning of COVID-19 and the lockdown. It was a problem then, it's a problem now. Where do you stand on the alcohol ban staying in place? What would you advise the President?
Well, I think that the moment we stop using alcohol, we see a drop in unnatural deaths in our country, and we see our ability to keep hospital beds open. So it's a tough thing, and I think we have to have a look at how we manage alcohol in our country. Alcohol does propagate violence, and so what we have to do is have a family talk about alcohol use and abuse in our country, and maybe things that we should be looking at is how do we control alcohol consumption? Do we limit the amount of people can drink? Do we limit operating hours? Do we increase the age of alcohol usage to 21? And so alcohol does fuel violence in our country. And we do see, the moment we start to control alcohol, we see drops in unnatural deaths. So we have to try and find a way of living with alcohol and keeping the unnatural deaths down, like we've seen when we prohibit it. So I am pro-alcohol. I drink alcohol myself, but I also see that we need to control it and make sure that we drink responsibly in our country.
How concerned are we about possible easing of lockdown restrictions when it seems to be the popular opinion, Doctor, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost seems like there's a fourth wave on the way later in the year, not a matter of if, it's a case of when it's going to arrive. Some critics will say, well, why are we going to now open everything up again just to see the numbers spike when we're expecting, it seems, this fourth wave in the later part of the year?
Well, there's a balance between lives and livelihoods, and so I think if we are scaling up rapidly our vaccination program, and that will help us. It'll protect against death and hospitalization, and so we have to open up our economy. We have to open up our country, and the only way we can do that is by vaccinating. And so we do have to ramp up. We want to get to the over 350,000 per day, and we're seeing that there's a huge attempt now that we've got supply in our country to open up vaccinations. And so what we have to do from now until December is make sure that we vaccinate as many people in our country as possible.
One thing, before I say goodbye to you, Doctor, what's the one thing you want to hear in the family meeting if it takes place tomorrow night?
I want to hear schools open. I want to preserve the academic year. I want to keep kids in schools. Kids have suffered terribly from the lockdown, from COVID, and we need to give them a normal life. We need to feed them and we need to keep them in school.
That's going to be a long-standing effect if we don't get them back into class quickly, isn't it? Dr. Glenda Gray, what a pleasure it always is to speak to us. I know how incredibly busy you are, giving briefings on Friday mornings, which we take as well. Glenda Gray, Dr. Glenda Gray, South African Medical Research Council, always with a smile on her face. Now, how often she talks about COVID-19.